So today is Monday, May 29th, 2023. Today's readings come from Acts 21 and John 14. The part that I'm going to read from Acts is towards the end, highlighted here. I am ready not only to be in prison, but even to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus. So this is Paul talking. And the relevant parts from the Gospel of John have Jesus talking. So he says, "If you loved me, you would have rejoiced because I go to the Father. I do so as the Father has commanded me, so that the world may know that I love the Father. Every branch of mine that bears no fruit he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit he prunes that it may bear more fruit. Abide in me and I in you. Neither can you bear fruit unless you abide in me. If a man does not abide in me, he is cast forth as a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you will, and it shall be done for you." Okay. So we talked yesterday about the way the person of God the Father, who is the hypostatic conditions of the hypostasis, that is the ontological ground of personality, of the human individual, is known through his absence, that is, the resurrection of revelation of the ontological ground, or, in the alternative, his presence, which is wrath and the making of the conditions of the revelation of the ontological ground. In Acts, Paul is taking seriously the fact that the crucifixion is the precondition for resurrection and the coming into consciousness or being of his ontological ground, that is, the diffusion of the ontological ground of being, or the, symbolically speaking, Christ impulse into the body, that is, the world. He's taking seriously that being towards death is the manner in which this diffusion takes place, and that the possibility of death is, counterintuitively, the conditions under which the generative actions of the Father's presence place his freedom into the horizon of possibility. In the Gospel of John, Jesus takes this seriously, where in coming to terms with his inevitable betrayal, i.e. his death and crucifixion, he says to the disciples that this death means he will be going to the Father, that is, the ontological origin of generation and creativity. He makes this claim in the context of his betrayal, that is, within the context of those people who have become a problem for him, or put differently, his persecutors. It's within the context of his being persecuted. The foundation of ontological generativity is the human being abiding in other human beings, in their ontological ground, even and especially those who have become a problem for us. This is the basis of transformation and renewal in the clinical dyad, that is, the alchemical confusion of projection and projective identification, in which the great soup of sentiment and concept makes each a problem for the other. In response to this confusion of human and human consciousness and unconsciousness, the words of Christ suggest one simple response: abide in me and I in you. That is, that the alchemical soup of the so-called analytic third becomes the prima materia of personal distillation, refinement, and becoming. Critical is the bringing into the third, the soup, of the ontological ground of the person, that is, the uncreated energy, the philosopher's stone, the aspect of the human being which is a mirror of God the Father, the foundation and origin of generativity, creativity, and freedom, brought into relationship as free, naive, and benevolent. The uncreated energy in the image of Christ, symbolically speaking, is that which is willing to undergo the symbolic crucifixion within the analytic dyad, the innocence of which is willing to undergo its extrinsic malleation. This is the meaning of relationality as interest, not as sexual interest which projects and takes the other as object, but rather interest as presence of the image of innocence and generativity of the other in the personally constituted being of oneself. Freedom of the other is conditioned on the possibility of freedom in another. One can be only as they are made in another, and only can be for others, as another is made in them. This is the truth of spiritual freedom, whose horrible truth is that the unacceptable image of the other, which they cannot stand to identify with, is something that, in the experience of the other in oneself, is an image with which the self identifies. The clinician must therefore hold in identificatory consciousness that which is unacceptable to the other, often requiring that the clinician identify with those aspects of themselves which they themselves have been unable to identify. The other in the analytic dyad is therefore, in their rejection of themselves, the salvation of the clinician, just as the clinician is the salvation of the other. Empathy is holding that self-concept, which the other cannot, and that, at the same time, the clinician could not hold of themselves.